it was common for churches to have revivals. You don't hear as much of it anymore. And, part of that, I think, is people don't go to church as much anymore as they used to. You have trouble getting them out on a weekday night, oftentimes.
People work more now than what they used to.
Yeah. And people need more revival now than ever, which is the reason why you don't have revival. Because a lot of times people don't, and sometimes they don't see their need for revival. And so those are some of the things I want to talk about this evening. I've been to many revivals over the course of my life, and I can tell you some revivals were good, but some, I think the preacher got confused about what a revival is. So many revivals that I can remember growing up, the revivalist, the evangelist, and I guess maybe they did this to kind of gauge, to kind of see how well they were doing or whatever, but they would focus on salvations. So many of us have seen this. A revivalist will preach on being saved, and then, they'll have the invitation, and it's primarily for people to be saved and that kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with having an invitation for people to be saved. But in order to be revived, you have to have been, living, once. So it's not like you're born again, or renewed is another word that you would use. And so I've always thought that revivals should not focus as much on the people that are not saved as they should focus on the people who are saved, who just need to be revived. And and sometimes it's hard to find, revivalists who will work on that angle of it. And I think scriptures bear that out. So there's a couple of Psalms that I want to look at. 85 is one of them here. The Bible reads in verse 1 of Psalm 85, Lord, thou hast been favorable unto thy land. Thou hast brought back the captivity of Jacob. Thou hast forgiven the iniquity of thy people. Thou hast covered all their sins. Selah. Thou hast taken away all thy wrath. Thou hast turned thyself from the fierceness of thine anger. Turn us, O God of our salvation, and cause thine anger toward us to cease. Wilt thou be angry with us forever? Wilt thou draw out thine anger to all generations? Wilt thou not revive us again, that thy people may rejoice in thee? So we see here where, this is kind of the famous phrase that is lifted actually for that song, revive us again. And so the psalmist says, when we were saved, he cleansed us of all of our sins, all those things, because again, we apply this spiritually. All of our iniquities have been forgiven. He's taken away all of his wrath from us. So then in verse 4, he says, turn us, O God of our salvation, and cause thine anger toward us to cease. Verse 6, he says, wilt thou not revive us again, that thy people may rejoice in thee? Show us thy mercy, O Lord, and grant us thy salvation. Verse 8, I will hear what God the Lord will speak. For he will speak peace unto his people and to his saints, but let them not turn again to folly. So, we want revival. We want to be revived, and we don't want to turn again to folly. I've think about this, and I've seen a couple of revivals in my life of Christians. The big one that I can think about was after the planes hit the buildings there on 2000 and 2001, which, seems like yesterday, but it was over 20 years ago that happened. Of course, I was at work on that day, and, people in the United States of America thought, we were at war. We were being attacked. And of course we were by terrorists, but, they couldn't sustain the war and everything. But, people were thinking the worst, of course. Where are bombs going to go off? Is this going to be like the Middle East, or something like that, where bombs are going to go off everywhere and all all kinds of issues. And so after that September 2001 attack, churches were full for a couple of weeks. People getting back to church, getting right with God, reviving. But they forgot about verse 8, not turning again to their folly, because it was a short-lived revival. Yeah. And so another time in this area that I can remember revival is a little bit before 2001 in Roanoke, at least Roanoke City. There was a big drought, and there was concern in the late 90s that Carvin's Cove, our main water supply, was going to dry up. It had never been as low as it was. And, preachers were, because, I was just a young adult then, and preachers were preaching to, that we need to turn to God, we need to get right, because, this could be part of God's punishment and everything. And politicians in this area in the late 90s were saying, pray for rain, pray for water. They were not against praying at that time, because we really needed rain in this area. Most of you guys probably remember that. I don't know if it was all this region or just Roanoke, but I remember it being down in Roanoke City. It's pretty rough. They were talking water restrictions and all sorts of things then. And the Lord came through and brought rain. There was revival at least in my area. I know everybody was talking about praying for rain, because everybody knew where rain came from, heaven. So that's where we should pray to for rain. That made sense to anybody. So, I've seen a couple of those revivals where people sort of get right. That's what needs to happen out west, and I fear it will not happen because they are a hardened, stiff-necked people out there in California and Las Vegas and those places. Because I just read an article today. The drought out there is as bad as it's ever been. And they've got huge lakes that are just drying up. And they're pumping the groundwater out of the ground, and it's not being replenished. There are big problems out west. And I think it's no coincidence either that out west is where a lot of the immorality in our nation is. In California, because that's, not just San Francisco, but a lot of places in California, because the government of California is run by just completely godless people. Oregon as well, and Nevada, a lot of those places. They are so far away from God. I don't know if they can understand revival and calling out to God. There's a famous verse that is used on revivals. If my people who are called by my name, will turn to me, then I will heal their land. It's in the book of 2 Chronicles, I believe, something like that. Humble themselves, yes. In the book of, as I say, 2 Chronicles chapter 7, I think. It's a famous verse on revival. If they turn, then God will, stop punishing and he will bless. And so, so here in Psalm 85, he says here, in verse 8, I will hear what God the Lord will speak, for he will speak peace unto his people and to his saints, but let them not turn again to folly. Surely his salvation is nigh them that fear him, that glory may dwell in our land. Mercy and truth are met together. Righteousness and peace have kissed each other. Truth shall spring out of the earth, and righteousness shall look down from heaven. Yea, the Lord shall give that which is good, and our land shall yield her increase. Righteousness shall go before him, and shall set us in the way of his steps. I believe that, the Bible, that there was a famous verse we just talked about, and then there's this passage right here, that, if an area turns to God, God will heal their land. So, it's a very powerful thing that we see there, if we will just be revived. Now, we can't control revival in an area like the size of Roanoke City or Roanoke County or whatever. We can control revival here at Gravel Hill Baptist. We can revived, God will bless us. I believe he has done it before when we have been revived. He and then especially in your own life, when you experience revival, God will bless you in your own life as well. So, those are the things that we can control, and those are the things that we should work on. Because revival begins with a person. And then, of course, ideally, from there, it can go to the local church and then to the local area. Go with me to Psalm 51, another passage on revival, though it doesn't mention the word revival. It mentions more the word renew, which is kind of the same thing. Psalm 51. If we want revival in our own lives, this is the kind of prayer we need to pray to God. This one like this in Psalm 51. So that we will be revived, so that we can do great things for God. Psalm 51 verse 1, have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according unto the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Against thee, thee only have I sinned, and done this evil in thy sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest, and be clear when thou judgest. Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Behold, thou desirest truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part thou shalt make me to know wisdom. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Make me to hear joy and gladness, that the bones which thou hast broken may rejoice. Hide thy face from my sins, and blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from thy presence, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. Restore unto me the joy of thy salvation, and uphold me with thy free gift. This is a great passage on revival. If you truly want revival in your own life, if you feel like you need revival, and I'm going to touch on that here in just a second, this psalm is one that David wrote after he had committed the wicked sin with Bathsheba. And he was as backslidden as it comes. And he said, Lord, please forgive me of my transgressions. He acknowledges that he sinned against God. He wants forgiveness. He wants to be cleansed. What we often hear, even in the secular world, is the first step in understanding the problem, if you're having a problem, is admitting that there is a problem. And that's where David goes right here. He says in verse 3, I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. He acknowledges, he understands where the hang-up is, where the problem is. And, I like this passage on revival because he asked the Lord for renewing in his own heart, for revival in his own heart. Forgive me, get me back on the right path. Notice verse 12, restore unto me the joy of thy salvation, and uphold me with thy free spirit. Then notice verse 13. After I get straight, after my revival is taken care of, in verse 13, then, he says, so after these things, then will I teach transgressors thy ways, and sinners shall be converted unto thee. See, he can't be effective for God until he is straight. He can't be a powerful tool that God uses to teach transgressors and to get people saved until his own life is straightened out. And so he asks for revival for himself first, and then he's able to help others. I fly in an airplane all the time. Most of you guys know this, I fly, and many of you have flown before. So, Miss Alice, you've never flown before? No? Okay. All right. So we've got to. Have you flown before? Yes, several times. Many of you have flown. Before you take off in that airplane, the stewardesses give you a safety talk. And part of that safety talk is if we have a loss of cabin pressure and we lose oxygen, then oxygen masks will fall from the ceiling. And every single time, what they tell you is put your mask on first before helping others. Because if you don't get your mask on, you'll pass out before you can help others. So, you got to put your mask on first and then put on the mask of your, little ones, help others or whatever. But you've got to take care of yourself first. When it comes to an emergency or life or death or something like that, that's what they say. You first so that you can help others. That's the thing. You're not being selfish, especially when it comes to this, like revival. Hey, you first so that you can help others. That's what we see here in Psalm chapter 51. Yes?
I was baptized at the first and only revival I've ever been to. It was a few years after my divorce, and I hadn't been to any church that I found I liked until I found out. And they happened to have a revival maybe a year or two after I went there.
Yep.
And I kept baptized there.
Yeah. Amen. And I have been to some revivals where I was like, yeah, this is something that I needed. But sometimes I think people get confused on revivals again because sometimes preachers will just preach about being saved, which, while it's important, revival is really about reviving people. Getting them fired up, getting them, hey, I got to clean up my, a good revival should step on your toes. A good revival should get you to say, you know what, I got to do better.
Get you out of that lazy stuff.
I got to straighten up, and that's what they're supposed to do, because then you get revived. Then that's kind of lights a fire. Your church gets revived. Then maybe your neighborhood gets revived, and that's kind of how it can spread out. But if the actual people themselves aren't revived, then how can you have revival? And it's harder and harder to have revival in the United States of America today because so many Christians don't realize they need revival. So many people are like that church of Laodicea. They're just lukewarm. They're neither hot nor cold, and they think they're fine. But, spiritually, they are poor and naked, and they need revival. And I see that in the United States of America. It amazes me, and I want to go to another place. I was studying on revival and renewal, and I found something in the book of Lamentations that just made me chuckle, just made me laugh, made me think about my grandpa. And Lamentations, you wouldn't think that would be a place where you would find something humorous. But if you study the Bible, you will find some humorous things in it as to how far we have come. And, we've heard the story of, the frog. If you're going to cook a frog, if you just throw it in boiling water, it'll bounce out because water's hot. But if you put it in water and then heat the water up slowly, it'll just sit in there until it cooks. I don't know if that's a fable or something, but you've heard the story, right, of the frog. You don't just throw it in and it just bounces out, So oftentimes with sin in our lives and things like that, it happens so gradually that we think we're all right. We turn around and look, and we're like, nah, the water's boiling. It's hot, and I'm being cooked, and I didn't even realize it. And I think that's where we are as a nation, and that's where we are as Christians. And so Lamentations is a very small book right after the book of Jeremiah. So if you find Jeremiah and you get to the end of it, we should find Lamentations, which Lamentations is a book that is actually about revival. Because, it talks about how God's mercies are new every morning. Jeremiah the book of Jeremiah is, of course, about, Jeremiah talking to God's children and warning them that, punishment is coming if they don't change their ways. That's what Jeremiah is about. Then at the end of Jeremiah, the punishment does come. And the children of Israel are carried away in captivity to Babylon. That is the end of the book of Jeremiah. So then the book of Lamentations is about, hey, now that we've been punished, let's get right with God so that we can get back to, where we're supposed to be. Lamentations about we've done all these bad things, but there's always time to be renewed. And that's kind of what this little book is about. But chapter 5 here. So in chapter 5, this kind of tells, Jeremiah is talking here, and he talks about how bad a shape the children of Israel are in, and they really need to be renewed. And so there's a long list of stuff here. So chapter 5, verse 1, remember, O Lord, what has come upon us. Consider and behold our reproach. Our inheritance is turned to strangers, our houses to aliens. Now, he's talking about a nation that has been captured by another nation. But I look at this, and I'm like, well, that happens every day today. Our inheritance is turned to strangers and our house to aliens. The government takes your inheritance. He takes your houses. They come for that. So in our situation today, hey, our government is the enemy. In this case. So if we continue to read verse 3, we are orphans and fatherless. Our mothers are as widows. That is 2022 United States of America. Where are the fathers? Where are they? Moms are like widows. Children are like orphans. Dads are not around. We see that. This is a nation, again, that has been punished. And these are horrible things that they're going through. I don't know if you realize it or not. We're going through the same thing. We don't really realize that it's punishment, which is kind of sad. It could be so much better. Now, this is what got me to chuckle. Verse 4. We have drunken our water for money. Our wood is sold unto us. Jeremiah says things are so bad that we are paying for water and firewood. We look at that today, but what got me to chuckle about this is because I can remember a time when nobody bought water in the United States of America. My grandfather, who died in 1990, if he knew today that the overwhelming majority of people that drink water actually buy it from the store, he would say, you people are crazy. You're absolutely nuts. You have a perfectly good tap right in there. What are you paying $4 or $5 a case for water? But I do that. And I have no problems drinking the water out of my own tap. I just buy the water because I like the bottles. I guess. I don't know. But we today, I found it funny because Jeremiah, he's like, man, things are so bad we're having to buy water and firewood. Well, we've been doing that in the United States for years. And nobody seems to think it's bad anymore. But there was a time, people who passed on, our parents, or our grandparents, they look at us thinking, what are you doing? Buying water out of a store when you have water at your house already. It would make no sense to them. It'd be like, you people are oppressed. I found this humorous when I looked at this. I was like, you know what? Buying water is a sign that you are under oppression. But the problem, again, I talk about the frog, in the water. We don't really realize it. We don't really think about it. How much we pay for things that are actually supposed to be free. Wood for fires. I go into any Lowe's or Home Depot, and you know what I see stacked up? Firewood for your fire pit at your fancy rich house. And I'm thinking that's the dumbest thing in the world because, I can find firewood really easy. I have a bunch of firewood at my house. I've given firewood away. Wood trees are plentiful, and they fall all the time. Cut it up, you got yourself some firewood. But no, we got to pay $6, $8 for like 4 little sticks. Yeah, and people don't see that as being oppression. Yeah, I see it as being oppression, And, part of it is, of course, the firewood industry, because, I'm going to get off on a little tangent here, but I've got a little time, get off on a little tangent here. As far as firewood goes, I refuse to buy firewood when I go camping. And it used to not be a big thing at all. But now, people say, oh, no, you can't take wood into a national forest because you'll introduce bugs or whatever, there that weren't there before, they say all that. I look at that and I think, that is a scam of the people that sell that firewood. Because they have, lobbyists that will tell you, oh, you got to get, this firewood's been cleaned. I don't know if they wash it or what. No, this firewood's, this firewood doesn't have any bugs. My firewood doesn't have any bugs in it. Especially after I burn it. So I look at that as, but people are so gullible, they will believe anything. And they will believe the environmentalists and say, oh, no, don't take any wood into the forest with you. You have to buy it there. I mean, there are trees in the forest all over the place that have been knocked down that are full of bugs. What's the difference? Yeah. And, the bottled water, oh, well, it goes through these processes. You know what? The bottled water that I drink comes out of Pennsylvania. I'll bet it comes out of a tap somewhere. I'll bet it is the exact same water that people in the houses around that plant have coming out of their taps, and they probably go to the store and buy the water that comes out of their taps. There's not that much they do to it. It's water. So, anyways, I found this humorous. Yeah, Brother Wendell.
I can ask the same question. Firewood and water.
Yep.
1 Timothy 6:10.
Yep, the love of money is the root of all evil. But, they would not sell water and firewood if people don't buy it.
Yeah.
People buy it. They believe anything. And we don't realize how much better things could be if we didn't buy things that we already have for free. And we do it all the time. And so we could have a lot of extra money if we, it kind of goes along with this morning's sermon. You'd have a lot of extra money if you stopped buying water and firewood. And instead just go get it at the free places. Now, of course, I pay a water bill every month, and I understand the need to pay a water bill and that kind of thing. Yet I still, I've got this water that goes through Roanoke's treatment plants that tastes just fine from the tap. Yep, I oftentimes still get water from the store. So. Anyways, I thought this was funny because, he's talking about how oppressed they are, and he talks about, man, we have to buy our own water and firewood. And I'm like, well, We've been duped into that here in the United States of America. Our government has been able to get us to basically buy everything. I mean, people are like, well, what's next? Air? Probably. They will probably charge you. They may already charge you for air. Do they charge you for air? I mean, here, look, you can go to the store and get this air. This is clean air. Yeah, for the air. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, anyways, so do we realize now that, hey, we are actually not as free as we think we are? Yeah, and a lot of this we bring on our own selves.
We have
nothing. Verse 5, our necks are under persecution. We labor and have no rest. We have given the hand to the Egyptians and to the Assyrians to be satisfied with bread. So they say, look, we've helped our enemies. And, we have as well today helped our enemies. So, verse 7, our fathers have sinned and are not, and we have borne their iniquities. Servants have ruled over us. There is none that doth deliver us out of their hand. We get our bread with the peril of our lives because of the sword of the wilderness. Our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. They ravished the women in Zion and the maids in the city of Judah. Princes are hanged up by their hand. The faces of elders were not honored. They took the young men to grind, and the children fell under the wood. The elders have ceased from the gate, the young men from their music. The joy of our heart is ceased. Our dance is turned to mourning. The crown is fallen from our head. Woe unto us that we have sinned. For this our heart is faint. For these things our eyes are dim, because of the mountain of Zion, which is desolate. The foxes walk upon it. Thou, O Lord, remainest forever, thy throne from generation to generation. Wherefore dost thou forget us forever and forsake us so long time? Turn thou us unto thee, O Lord, and we shall be turned. Renew our days as of old. But thou hast utterly rejected us. Thou art very wroth against us. You see where he says, look, turn us back to the way things were. And you know, this world does not like for things to be turned back to the way they were. You know, they grumble about it all the time. I mean, what does he say here in Lamentations? He says a lot of things that we go through here in the United States. For example, he says, you know, the old men that used to be the rulers, they don't rule anymore. And that is the case as well here in the United States of America. You know, we need, you know, God said, you know, I sought for a man and found none. We need men to stand up and be leaders. We need revival in the United States of America. You know, it's very interesting. I'm going to say something that probably is, you know, the world would say, oh my goodness, you know, what's he saying there? But you know, the Bible tells us that when you start living in sin, when you start doing that kind of stuff, when men start forsaking that stuff, then women and children will reign over you, and it's going to be bad. That's what it says. So if we look at crime statistics today, we will see that crime in Chicago is horrendous. It's horrible. A lot of these cities out west, crime is crazy. You know, they say that crime is very bad in Atlanta, you know, and so many other places. Washington, D.C., a horrible place for crime. You know what a lot of these places have in common? The mayor's a woman. Yeah, and some of the things that I read that they come up with, I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. You know, some of these places where women are the mayors, those are the biggest places right now in the United States of America that say, oh, we want to get rid of the police. No, we're just going to kill them with kindness. We're just going to, these whatever, robbers, rapists, murderers, they're just misunderstood. Yeah. And anyways, it's racist to think about it. That comes from women who are in charge. And that's the reason that so many of these places have, they're a mess. They're a wreck. You know, you don't want to walk in the streets of Chicago, anywhere, in daylight. Chances are you'll be shot. And you know, that it's run by a woman. Yeah. Look, not downplaying women at all, because they are very important in our society, and they are the ones that oftentimes are the ones that raise the household. But, you know, the Bible tells us, you know, hey, we should get back to the time where men were, you know, and righteous men, by the way, not corrupt men like we have today also in the United States of America, which is pretty rough. But, you know, yeah, somebody that can stand up and say, you know, this is what needs to happen. And that kind of thing. And we don't have it. We could use a revival of some backboned, strong leaders, not just in the presidency, but as mayors and everything. You know, I get so tired of hearing, oh, this is the first woman to do this, and this is the first black woman to do this, and this is the first, you know. Look, we don't need firsts. You know, all of our firsts are breaking the United States of America. What we need are godly Christian men to take the reins. and it's not easy. And so many men, we're just naturally lazy. It's not easy to get back to that. But that's a kind of revival that we need as well. I think in the United States, we don't realize the kind of revival that we need. We talk about, we talked about the drought in California, and we talked about paying for water. Sometimes people complain, oh man, I can't even afford my water, because they buy bottles of water when they've got, some coming out of the tap. It's just a crazy situation that we live in. So, the Bible talks about revival and renewal all the time. In the New Testament, Romans chapter 12, I'll end with this, Romans chapter 12, and this is just one of many places that Paul talks about this. He says in Romans chapter 12, verse 1, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Verse 2 of Romans chapter 12, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Sometimes Christians, their mind is so corrupted with the world that they don't know hardly the difference between right and wrong. They don't know what the will of God is. If you renew your mind, you can prove. It means you can test what that perfect will of God is. You'll know that. And the way you know that is to be revived, to get back into church. I know some Bible-believing Christians who got saved, who have been backslidden, who need a revival, who don't realize it, and they think that watching TV preachers is going to church. Good, saved people, and they cannot recognize the false doctrine that is being thrown at them because they're so backslidden. They don't recognize it. They've been gradually just being conditioned to it. And then you get back to church, and then you look at those pastors that you thought were doing good, and you're like, man, they're horrible. They're garbage. Try stepping away from television for a few years, because I have done that. Stepped away from watching television for a few years. And, you never really think it's that bad. Even shows from the 80s and 90s that I used to watch all the time, and I didn't see anything wrong with them. I watch the same ones today, and I'm like, ooh, that's terrible. That's horrible. And then you watch television, you watch commercials and those kinds of things, and you just don't think anything about it. I mean, I stopped watching television a good long while ago and stopped watching commercials a good long while ago. And then every once in a while, when I happen to be in front of a television at mom and dad's house or something and I watch commercials, I am shocked by the number of just openly homosexuals that are in commercials nowadays. But most people, they're probably just used to it because it started out with one. Two guys holding hands. And then the next thing you know, pretty much every commercial has, weirdos in it. People who watch television all the time don't notice it. But people who don't watch all the time look at that and they're like, I would have never thought I would have seen the day. But we have. So that's, we need to be woken up. Because many of us, we need revival and we don't really realize it until we take stock of our lives, like David did. Until we see what's going on. Like, I got to get that straightened out. Let's pray. Dear Father, I thank you for this day, Lord, and for your many blessings to us, Lord. I pray that you will help each of us, Lord, deal